Hello and welcome to another episode of Flipping Out. This is Paul Izell, your host, and today I have Valerie Shirah, and I think I pronounced that right. Did I not, Valerie?
You did.
Good. I want to make sure I get that right. And Valerie is a real estate investor, obviously, and she has her own podcast too. I think it's called the Wealth of Choice podcast. She's a wife, mother of three, and an entrepreneur. And I cannot wait to get in here and talk to her because I don't get many women on my podcast, and it's a totally different perspective. And I love to get the female perspective on how it is, how they deal with things compared to how guys deal with things too. So, Valerie, I'm really, really looking forward to that because we do deal with things a little bit differently. Sometimes very similar, but there's other things we take different approaches to. And I love getting different approach and different ideas that I'm definitely not thinking about at all times. So Valerie, the first question I have for you is how did you get involved? How did you get your start in real estate investing?
Sure. Well, thanks, Paul, for having me on the show. I'm really excited to be here. Going back to the beginning, the way that we got started in real estate was kind of an accident at first. I say accidentally flipped a couple houses. And it was more, I say accidental because it wasn't a real estate move. It was more, my dad does construction, and we just thought, oh, we hear people flipped houses, maybe we could do that kind of from the construction side. So we did two of those. And the background that I come from is you do everything yourself to save money. And so we hated them. It was awful. We're talking bringing the kids to the flips, doing all that. It was insane. I told my husband, I'm never doing those again. That was awful. But it gave us a little bit of money. And we had heard a little bit about real estate, but we were like kind of slow, not a big deal. About that time, we found out that my husband has Parkinson's disease. And at the time, he was 35 years old. And I'll be honest, it was a shock. It was just not planned for, not what we were, not part of the big picture of what we had going on. And so we just kind of had to really pivot. And he was a heavy equipment operator at the time. And so we just realized that that was not going to be a long-term job for him. He started having a tremor in his right arm. That's kind of the red sign. And we were like, something's not right. So we had to go to a neurologist and, find out the diagnosis, and kind of shook up and welcome to reality. You can't always rely on your W-2. And so that kind of transitioned us a lot faster than we ever would have, maybe on our own without that driving factor. So that's kind of the motivating thing that got us into it in the first place.
Yeah, it's like sometimes you get forced into things, right? This was an example. You were kind of forced to pivot and you're not planning on it. We always want to plan on as much as we can as humans, right? We want to plan and be able to figure out this is step one, this is step two, this is step three. Well, this puts you in a fast forward, right? You had to really quickly, you had to pivot and what is the next thing in life we could do? Because if he has Parkinson's, he's not going to be able to be operating heavy equipment, right? He's not going to be able to do that. So you got to figure what you can transition to. So with that, is your husband involved pretty actively in your real estate investing business at this point?
He is now. In the beginning, it was hard. He still was working, and with heavy equipment operators in Ohio, it's a really seasonal job. Mm-hmm. So from spring to fall, we don't see him, but then he's home all winter months because, you're not really doing much on the roads in the winter. And so that's kind of when we tried to really look at real estate. And there's so many different avenues. It was a little bit overwhelming, you're wholesaling, we looked at wholesaling, we looked at Airbnb, we looked at single family, multifamily, and it was overwhelming. And it's one of those things I definitely believe you could be successful in any of them, but you're going to have to pick one. And that was hard for us at first because you hear, hey, this is the way you should go. That's the way you should go. And at first, I feel like we kind of went all over trying to figure out what that best route was for us. Mm-hmm. But I would say in the beginning, our biggest struggle was trying to do the W-2 and manage the side hustle that we were doing. And it got to a point where I was really struggling. We have three kids. I was homeschooling and trying to do a lot of this stuff while he was at work, looking at properties, putting all the kids in the car, going to look at things, trying to figure out how to analyze deals, figuring out what looks like a good deal, a good buy, trying to go to meetups, all those things. And it was hard. And I think we got about I'd say a year and a half into it. And I said to my husband, I don't think we can do this. It's a lot, trying to transition. That awkward stage between full-time W-2 and full-time real estate was definitely the hardest part for us when we were going through that.
No doubt.
Um,
No doubt. I remember doing that myself, going from, W-2, doing fix and flips, occasional wholesale deal on the side there, to full time real estate investing.
mhm.
And like you, I had three kids, or actually at that point I had two. The third one wasn't around for another 2 years when I went full time there. It's hard to juggle that. And my wife was working full time, doing also a W-2 at that point. So trying to juggle and put all those things together to the point where eventually I went full time in 2004. She worked W-2 until 2009. And now I have her finally involved doing some stuff with the business there, probably much to her chagrin. she does, she's the organizer. And this is where women tend to be really, really good. Organizing and like or getting things together, getting the structure really together. That's what her mindset is too. And I think that's we're hunters and gatherers. Guys go out and we hunt the deal, and women gather, right? But it's not every woman, that's not every guy either. But that was our mindset, and that was
Mhm.
so she worked well with me. She does the bookkeeping for me now, and turning on utilities for these different properties for me now, and all these different things that I hate doing. And she doesn't mind. She likes tasks. Give me a task, let me finish it and check the box. So that's a perfect match for me. And hopefully you guys have some of that symmetry too, that makes it work a little bit better in your business there. But I wanted to jump into, you utilize something we do too. And it took me way too long to get into this to where I needed. And I started hiring VAs, but you probably started looking at all the things you hated doing, started hiring VAs for that, would be my guess. Am I right with that?
Yeah, pretty much. And going back to what you said about you and your wife finding or kind of taking your roles, that's really what it came down to. I feel like when we were just getting into it, I would do what I could, he would do what he could, and we're just kind of like stumbling over each other. It's like we're both kind of looking for deals, we're both kind of analyzing, and we're both kind of reaching out to brokers, wholesalers, and all that. It just a little bit messy. And
Yeah.
at the time we decided we purchased our first fourplex, and we did kind of like midterm rentals with it. So traveling nurses, medical students, and we're dealing with messaging guests and trying to um, make like your handbooks and the
Mhm.
social media stuff, that kind of goes along with that. And then we kind of wholesaled a property at that time, and so it was just a lot of things going on, and we didn't have clear paths for each other. And I think that was really one of the biggest things that we struggled with together. So I love that you found like your strengths, your wife's strengths, and you kind of stay in your lane. And it
Yeah.
took us a little bit of stumbling on each other before we really found um, what areas that we were good at, and that we kind of not separate the tasks, but
Mhm.
kind of, so that I know, hey, I'm the one who's doing this, and you're taking care of that, and I don't have to worry about it anymore. But
Yeah.
yeah, going to the VAs, that's for sure. Like that about that time when we all were kind of like overwhelmed, stumbling over each other. I'm saying, look, I don't know how we can keep doing this. Somebody had told me about virtual assistants,
Mhm.
and I didn't really even know what they were. Started looking into them, started trying to find any podcasts I could that explained a little bit more what they could do, what they were capable of. And we just decided to hire one. We thought that makes sense, give them some jobs to do. I don't remember who I heard say this, but somebody had said something about hiring a full time one because they can really devote themselves to your company
Yes.
instead of like task oriented. So we're like,
Right.
okay, we can do that.
Yeah.
We went ahead, hired our first VA, and I'll be honest, she was a great VA, but I did not know what I was doing. Never hired anybody before. I just kind of threw together a little bit of a job description, had like, I don't remember, probably a couple hundred resumes come back. And I'm like, oh my word, just pick one. And I literally just picked one because I didn't know what I was doing.
Right.
And so, getting started with her name was Nicole, and getting started with her, it was a challenge. I didn't know how to train. I'm just like getting on
Mhm.
these things. I'm like, hey, I don't know how to do this. Can you figure out how to, set up automatic messages in the Airbnb? And so she'd kind of do that. And, it was interesting in the beginning. I made a lot of mistakes, but over the course of a few months, it was a game changer for us. We kind of waited out that up and down period where you feel like it's worse than before you hired them.
Yeah.
And then in the long run, it really started to make a difference in what we were able to accomplish together with her help.
Yeah, hiring's difficult, right? Because you have to train that person,
Hmm.
and yeah, that means you've got to be there for them, be able to answer questions when they have them there. But in the meantime, you're trying to homeschool 3 kids. You're dealing with Airbnbs and questions that people are having there, and for people that don't have Airbnbs, they can be a lot of work, as far as checking people in. If you're in an HOA, all kinds of different things. I actually had a super host handle my second one because my first one I handled, and it was a ton. So I found a good super host who handled and took all that onus off me, which was great. But that's kind of, you're taking money out of your own pocket doing that unless you have somebody in house. I do think that you could almost have a VA run the Airbnb business for you to an extent, right? As long as they have all the right context, the cleaner, the repair person, right? All those different things to do. Have you been able to utilize that for your Airbnbs at all?
Yeah, for sure. And, in the beginning, I just was giving her tasks, like, hey, we'll get on this morning. Can you do this?
Yeah.
And she would go do that. But it was a lot of work on me. And it wasn't until later that I realized I needed to give her the overall picture and the goals, what we're headed, where we're headed, what I'm wanting to do with this, and then a little bit of a bigger scope for her to see, and have a better idea of what the big picture is, so that as she's doing these tasks, she's working towards something, if that makes sense.
Make perfect
Instead of
sense.
just giving her just enough to bite off for today. It's just like you can't quite see through the crack what you're doing, but you're going to do the best you can. And so that was one of the biggest things that I started changing. It was like, what, let's have, even if it's a monthly meeting, and say, hey, look, this is what my idea is for this next month. This is kind of what we're going to be shooting for. These are the targets that we're hitting, and this is what I'm going to have you do. And I started kind of shifting and having her take over an area instead of just a specific task. And, a lot of people may be like, yeah, duh. But for me at the time, I really didn't think of that. It was just kind of task by task. And that was a lot of work.
It's a ton
So
of work. And you're like you were talking about before, you come from a family where you just do it and take care of everything. And I'm the exact same way as you are. I was the exact. So the hardest thing for me is to delegate. To this day, it's
mhm.
still hard for me to delegate tasks and do stuff, and my wife's doing the bookkeeping now, so I don't have to deal with doing any of that stuff. And she needs still my time to figure out certain transactions and different things. So I still have to give time. So like you said, you're training somebody, you're still giving up time, which is taken away from other things too. We're almost to the point where she doesn't really need me at all, which is great. It took a month, but we're almost at that point, which is good. But for the VAs, I agree with you. And I did the same thing. I just gave them specific tasks at first before any kind of a bigger view. And now we have certain ones that, of course, good at certain tasks. Like we have somebody who's really great at comping for us, comping properties. So we
Mhm.
utilize her for those tasks. And now we have another one that we're utilizing for social media management, things like that. So they're great at that tasks. But I'm looking at this point to add a third, another one that can do a lot more to really take me away from a lot of the day-to-day operations, so I can do more things like talk to great people like you on this podcast and do that, which I really, really like a lot. And I like getting other people's stories and other people's perspectives on stuff. So, but no, utilizing the VAs has probably been a humongous game changer for you and saved you a ton of time.
Yeah, for sure. And you touched on something. In the beginning, a lot of times you can only get one VA. I mean,
Mhm.
they're not expensive, relatively speaking, because of depending on where you get them from.
Right.
But there's still money out of your pocket.
Yeah.
You're looking at, that's my profit going away.
Yes. Agreed.
But right, so it can be a little bit hard to release that and to
Yeah.
accept the fact profit's going to go down, but productivity is going to go way up. So like, yeah, at first I got one VA, and I see she's like a little bit of a jack of all trades, or she was after I trained her in all these areas. And then, I
Mhm.
mean, she's still with me today, a couple years later. And I mean, she's such an integral part of our company. She knows all the different departments because I've had her everywhere. But as I've grown, that's when I get a specific VA for social media. And then I
Mhm.
get a specific VA for like cold calling and skip tracing. And, that's as you grow, then you can get those VAs that are really good and they have those strengths in one area.
Yeah.
And instead of, the jack of all trade, master of none, where they're okay, they're getting you by, but they're not a specialist in that area. So that's just something you have to kind of accept as you grow. And I had to do the same.
Yeah. No, that's definitely something we all deal with and figure out. And I think it never ends, right? You're always going to be hiring to an extent because you're always hopefully going to be growing a company and do some different things. Plus, you may have taken on some different interests. Maybe you want to get involved in buying non-performing notes, right? That's a whole other business you get it. Then you start to learn that, and then you maybe hire a VA to replace you on some of those different things there. So it's important. It's just to free up your time, so that way you can come up with different things that you could do for the company and make the company more profitable, more productive.
Mhm.
So that, yeah, hiring, somebody once told me, be quick to slow to hire, quick to fire. Slow to hire, quick to fire. Actually, a lot of people have said that. So you want to pick your person well, the VA. And when I first hired my first one, I was just really quick and I kind of got lucky. She was like yours, jack of all trades, really good. Her name is Anna. We still utilize her. She does a lot of things really well, but nothing specifically great, right? Just a lot of things really, really well. But now I've had transition from full time to part time so that I can hire different people who are good at certain specific tasks to run for me and do. I guess it's part of our learning curve as we're running businesses and doing different things. So next question I have for you: you said you were in Ohio, right? Is Ohio the market that you're mainly involved in? Are you in other markets, or is Ohio it?
So actually, we're transitioning. Where I'm from Ohio, and actually, right now, you can see my gorgeous background. We moved to North Carolina, and we actually were planning on doing some traveling. Have a fifth wheel camper that we remodeled, gorgeous, nice inside. On the way down, we didn't even get to sleep in it at night. We had some issues with it, and so it's being repaired right now. And apparently, RV parts are hard to get in the middle of summer in
Yes.
June when everybody's using them. So we're a month out. So we ended up just renting a house. We've got some
Mhm.
air mattresses up, making some memories. That's why I've got the blah background. I apologize for that,
That
but
is not a problem.
we're that's where we're at right now. We're in North Carolina. We're transitioning down to like the Triad area, and we're going to make that our market. That's where we want to live. That's where we want to invest. And so I'll be honest, it's a transition coming from an Ohio market down to North Carolina. Coming from what would be more like a cash flow market. It's not hard to find properties for sale
Yeah.
down to more of an appreciating market where
Mhm.
we don't ever see for sale signs here, and so it's going to be interesting. I'm excited about learning more about this area and how we're going to fit into the investing world here.
That's awesome. I did something very similar. So I'm originally from Pennsylvania, about 45 minutes north of Philadelphia. And we're coming up in August 2 years ago. We moved to Naples, Florida, Southwest Florida. So of course I'm
Wow.
learning this new market here, but I was already buying all over the country before. And
Mhm.
Ohio was the first state that I bought an out-of-state property in, by the way.
Okay.
Ohio was the first in Youngstown and then in
Yep.
Akron and Cleveland and then Cincinnati. I bought all over. I love Ohio and Indiana. Those are two great markets there. But now you're in North Carolina, again, one of my favorite markets. You're not seeing for sale signs because the migration pattern is going. People are going to North and South Carolina, to Georgia, to
Exactly.
Florida, to Texas, to Tennessee, the Sun Belt, right, to Arizona. That's where people are going. They're getting out of those other states and moving this. Especially you, and now you're in this business. You could do it from anywhere. And
Mhm.
and North Carolina, by the way, phenomenal market, great people, great buyers. When you're going to resell to other investors, wholesaling, really good people in Ohio too. They're just even happier in North Carolina, is what we find when we sell properties there. They're even happier. And there's so many different things there. I mean, you got so many different great areas. You got what Asheville and the Smoky Mountains. Obviously, Charlotte's great. I actually have a property in very northeastern North Carolina now. We're renovating Edenton, North Carolina. So it's a big state. It's got a lot of different great stuff, but it's an appreciating market. It's still red hot right now. So you'll do really well there. You enjoy it a lot. And by the way, I think it's Raleigh, North Carolina. That has become another Silicon Valley hub location. And it's appreciated a bit, but I still think if you're thinking like longer term, that wouldn't be a bad place to invest a bit in, especially for rentals and stuff, that Raleigh, North Carolina market for sure.
Yeah, good to know. I'm excited about being here. So it'll be interesting as we slowly get our footing here and see what we can do.
Now, your dad was a general contractor, correct?
Yes.
So did he help you with a lot of your flips and fix and flips and that you've done over the years?
Yeah, so we did two of them, and he was involved. He helped, but like I said, there was a couple things that we struggled with, and mindset was one of them. I come from a home where you do it yourself to save money, and so you don't hire the subcontractors. You do the block work, you do the painting, and you do everything because you're trying to save money. But what we didn't, we're not taught is you can only do one deal a year, or two deals a year. I mean, it's so slow. It's you and your family, so it's not scalable. And that's something that I just had a hard time paying people when I think I could do that for half the price. But you're not thinking, okay, but so it takes you a month to do it. It's not worth your time. If you can't grow beyond that. And so we really had to really break free from that mindset. And then there were a couple other things that I feel like we really struggled with. The other one is partnerships. We were always told you don't partner. Partnerships always end bad. You don't want to get stuck saddling with somebody that, might not work out. And so you do it yourself. Well, I feel like you can really limit what you're able to do if you're going to just do it yourself. Yes. And that was something that we really struggled with, but it took a while. And, I could just kind of fast forward to kind of where we left off. When we decided to we wanted some bigger multifamily properties. You can't really do it without partnering unless you're just trust fund baby and you've got a lot of money. And we were kind of considering stuff. And I got on to network with another investor, Alex Tam. And we got on to talk about real estate, but he had 12 virtual assistants, going back to the VA thing. And so we just talked about virtual assistants. And at the end of the call, I said, Alex, I really think that more people would use VAs if the process was easier. I felt like at least training people how to, because it was just like the school of hard knocks for me. And he's like, I really think that's true, because it was the same for him. So we ended up partnering and creating it's called the Streamline team. It's a virtual assistant agency together. But going back to the partnership thing, which is where this is going, I struggled with that. I didn't really know him very well. I was kind of like, this is kind of a scary thing. And I went to one of my mentors and I asked him, he's in multifamily space, and I said, what do you think about partnerships? As far as this, we haven't done a partnership. I'm a little bit nervous about this. And so he was like, okay, first off, how much money are you putting into this? Are you putting hundreds of thousands into this where you're kind of sink or swim? You're putting your life savings into this? And I was like, no, not at all. It's really going to be starting from scratch. We're not putting a lot of money into it. It's more time, time investment. He's like, okay, so if the partnership went south and everything ended, you're not going to lose your life savings. And I was like, no. He's like, all right, what do you gain from it? I said, well, he's an experienced business person. I'd gain a lot of experience with him. We'd get the whole experience of creating a company. And I started listing all the benefits. And he's like, okay, so what do you think? And it was just like kind of a relief to me, to be able to look at it from a different side, instead of all the negatives that could happen in a partnership, to what could happen if it went right. And being okay, if for whatever reason that worst happens and it goes south, are you okay with what you lose? And so that was something that I really felt was valuable taking out of that is, mindset break with partnerships, that I feel like, if people struggle with that may be helpful for them to think of it from the other side.
It is. I mean, it is a difficult mindset for a lot of us to have, right, with that. But multifamily space, you kind of have to partner with people. Just nature of the beast, how much money you're putting into these deals. You want to try to raise capital for it. You need multiple people to potentially do that. Plus, if you get in these big projects, there's a lot that goes in. There's a lot of moving parts in those projects, right? Between if you're doing a value add where you're buying a B class property and trying to make it a much nicer, more modern, up to date, that's a lot of renovation stuff going on there. So there's a lot of time that goes into that, and everybody has the role in those different things. Somebody generally is the person that raises the funds, another person is the one that's involved in the day-to-day stuff. So yeah, partnership is kind of a must with that is what I found as well. I do some of the small multifamilies. Like I have a 12 unit in Casper, Wyoming. I have a 5 unit that I'm renovating now. I'm looking at more getting to 30, 40 units and maybe springing into some of the bigger stuff right now. It's tough. That market is really tough right now. Lending is tough, right? As you're probably seeing, but is that where you're pushing? Are you guys pushing the multifamily, or are you going to the Airbnb? What's your preferred models or standard rentals?
Yeah, so right now, I mean, we're kind of the smaller multi. We're looking at probably up to 20-ish units. That's kind of what we're looking. But again, I'll be honest, we're getting to know the market. What does the market have to offer right now that's not, really compressed? Whether that's more Airbnb, was it wholesaling? Is it, going to be the small multi? Is it going to be a little bigger multi? We're kind of getting to know that because we've kind of, I don't want to say dabbled, but we've kind of done a lot of different areas. And so we're wanting to go deep in one specific thing here in the market. And we're also looking at business acquisitions. We're looking at purchasing some businesses in the area. So that's kind of the game plan. And I really believe that everything we do should be integrated. We need to use our strengths. For us with the virtual assistant agency, anything I do that can be done online is a strength. I've got that kind of like as a weapon in my back pocket. And so whether that's, working with flipping, can the VAs do a lot of the ordering and project management and all that kind of stuff? Or is it going to be multifamily? Can we teach some of the VAs how to underwrite and help look for some of the deals? And, if you're looking for off-market properties, can they cold call? So trying to look at what strengths that you have and really implement them into what you're doing. And so that helps us weed out things that are just the shiny objects, because we know entrepreneurs really struggle with that. It just helps me say no. It's like, no, I don't really have an advantage. I don't have a leverage to do that. So I'm trying to do that with all the different things that are possibilities.
I know it's never changed. You're constantly making adjustments, looking business, what you're going to do. And a lot of times the market dictates what you're going to shift to.
For sure.
Back in 2000, I think it was 2013, I had done my record number of deals and I was a one-man shop. I did 134 and I was buying we specialize in buying in online auctions all over the country. Okay. So I had 134 that I bought and sold that same year. It was me doing the acquisition, me doing a disposition. And I tried to do as many back-to-back closings as I possibly could. We wholesaled a lot that way. Whatever we couldn't wholesale, we threw on the MLS to sell that way. But it was constant work, and it was days that were running into days. I'd wake up 7 a.m, work, go to bed sometimes 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, rinse and repeat, do the same thing. And I'm like, you know what? And I was doing deals where I was making 500 or 1,200, and my average deal profit was 7,800, and it wasn't enough. I'm like, I got to get back to where I want it to be. I want to get to at least $12,000 per deal. So what I did the next year, I'm like, all right, I don't care about doing that many deals. I'm going to shrink the amount of deals I do. I'm only going to go for the more profitable ones. I'm going to focus on them more. And I did. I was able to increase next year to 12,800 and then 15,000 a year after, doing less and less deals. So a lot of times less is more, right? So the market dictates what we do. And now, of course, the market's dictating what we do because there's just not a whole lot of inventory out there. It's not a whole lot of choices for us to do. So now it's about maximizing our deals as much as we possibly can. And what can we do with the property? And Airbnbs are great and I love them. The problem right now we're running into is interest rates went up, right? So the refinance is expensive and they don't cash flow as well as they used to. But now I'm hoping that rates will come down. The Fed finally did their pivot today and decided not to increase the rate again, which is good. Hopefully, maybe. I don't know what it's going to do to long-term rates. We'll find out. But that might dictate what we do. But if we dropped all of a sudden, went to 5.5% mortgage rates, maybe we go back into the buying mode of different types of properties as well. So a lot of times I think the market dictates to us, but as much as anything, it's like what your interest is, right? What is your interest? What are your strengths? Go to them as much as possible. I love how you're saying we're going to go into this and just go deeper into this, because I think that's always the best way possible, rather than, we all get shiny object syndrome or always look. And I do. I I was guilty of this for years, going to this. I'm like, you know what? Nope. Do what you're good at and get better at what you're good at. Right? Isn't that the key?
Right, right. Sometimes I think my husband and I have a day, I don't say daily, but it seems daily. Like, okay, wait, what are we focusing on a day today? Because somehow by the end of yesterday, we were kind of off track. And it's like, what's that number one again?
Yes, I know. It's hard even for me, the podcast, like I had 4 podcasts today here. I still have 2 more I'm doing after this here. And it's like there's days where I'll clump them all in there and do that. And I like it. I enjoy the heck out of doing that. But it's like, all right, what's my schedule look like today? What else can I do? What can I fit into my compressed schedule?
Sure.
And you got 3 kids. How old are your kids, if you don't mind me asking?
Sure. 10, 8, and 6.
10, 8, 6. So they're still very hands-on. You still need
Yeah.
to do a lot for them with them, especially with homeschooling. I got 20-year-old son who's going into his junior year at Gettysburg University in Pennsylvania. I got a senior just graduated, 18-year-old son, a 16-year-old son, and a 9-year-old daughter. So we got a little gap between the last one there. So she's the only one that really needs like us involved heavily. The other ones are off on their own. They can all drive now and do stuff. So what I'm telling you is it does get easier in a few years down the road.
There's hope at the end of the tunnel, huh?
Yeah, there's hope at the end of the tunnel, and you'll have to put earplugs in because they'll talk back to you a lot because teenagers love to talk back to you. But that's right. You guys are doing the right thing. You're homeschooling. You're able to have much more influence on them than your typical person is that doesn't homeschool. And I think what you're doing is all the right things, and you're building businesses right, and you got into and you understand, and you're building the VA business, and it's called the Streamline team, right? The yes. VA business. So we'll make sure, I think if I don't have a link, I'll make sure I get that, and we'll put that in the show notes for those who are looking to add VAs to their business here as a source for you guys to be able to do that here, the Streamline source. So that is awesome. Now, what are your plans? Obviously, you got the RV that's not working now currently. So you were originally planning on driving around, going different things. That just got delayed now. And the good thing is, since you're homeschooling kids, you can go in the RV and homeschool, right?
Exactly.
You can do that. So do you have any specific areas you're looking to travel over the next, say, few months when this is when the RV is ready to go again?
Yeah, so we were planning on popping in down here in North Carolina, getting a little bit of feel for the area, and then we were going to kind of start looking for deals while we travel.
Love it.
Now the plans may have right. The plans may have changed a little bit, but we would like to go west. There's a lot of places that I've been west. My husband hasn't been west, and that was one thing we started looking at. As Parkinson's progresses, we don't really know what the future holds. It's typically a disease that you get when you're older. And so it's hard to compare and find, I don't say examples, but like different cases of people who've gotten it when they're young. So what do we expect? Is this, is it going to progress? Is he going to be able to hike and do all these things with the kids as they get older? So that's kind of why we thought, the move between Ohio and North Carolina is kind of like a good segue to just take a little bit of break, travel, go see some of these things. Like I mentioned earlier, my youngest is 6, so he can hike. We can kind of go see some of these national parks and things like that. So that's kind of what we were thinking, kind of hit some of the bigger spots and then head back to North Carolina, because I certainly don't want to spend a winter up in Montana or anything like that.
No, you're right about that.
That's kind of the plan.
Oh, that's awesome. Get to see some different things. The kids enjoy it and you bond. And that's an awesome thing. That's tremendous. And then you see different areas that maybe the better thing with you driving around and see different parts potentially of North Carolina too, is that you can figure out what areas you want to invest in. And then maybe going out of state, looking at other different markets, maybe you make some contacts in those markets. And maybe that becomes a place you become a little bit more of an active investor, even if it's just from like trying to pick up an Airbnb or something like that in that market. So I always love the idea, like being able to travel. That's why I like buying all over the country. Then I can see different markets. I don't travel to them very often. I did go to Wyoming for my ones in Casper. But otherwise, if a lot of times I'll try to buy in an area I want to go visit. So, all right, then that gives me an excuse. I went to Tucson, Arizona, because I want to see Phoenix and all that. So I did do that. And then it becomes a tax write-off too, which is the beautiful part of it, right? The whole trip does. And then you learn different and you make different contacts in different markets. And then you can literally invest virtually in a different market and have some element of boots on the ground to be able to do that. So that's great. So you might end up finding on this road trip that you end up finding 2 other markets that you want to invest in now. That'd be great.
Yeah, you never know. And, I read a book, I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called Lifeaneer. And he just kind of Yeah, he just kind of talks about doing those, not waiting. Why do you have to wait until, I don't know, you're 65 and then you get to do everything you ever wanted? Typically, life doesn't happen that way. My mom passed away 4 years ago from leukemia. And that was another thing that was certainly not planned for. But one thing my dad keeps saying is, I'm so glad that we did things as a family. I'm so glad I took her places. We traveled as kids. And so it's one thing I want for my family. I don't want to wait to live. You have to live, now. And so sometimes I like to encourage people, think outside the box. Maybe some of those pipe dreams aren't as far away as you think they may be, and you might be able to make them work. And like you said, tax breaks, if you're doing some business while traveling, that really helps. And just kind of arranging your life around some of your dreams, maybe it makes some things possible that you thought were, far away.
Absolutely. One of the things I love about real estate more than anything is it's a lifestyle business.
Hmm.
So I can live the business. I can make the business work around my life, the kind of life I want to live. And you're doing the same thing. You could do the absolute same thing. It's hard to do in a regular 9 to 5 job, being
Exactly.
able to travel and do these different things. So for me, like when I'm going, I'm going to Australia for 10 days. And I always wanted to do this, a bucket list, my wife and I. So we're going there end of September and early October. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut down operations for those 10 days. Personally, my VAs, my business partner will handle the educational side of the business for us, and all the rehab stuff. I have somebody who's going to be able to handle the rehab stuff that we have going on there too. And it's something that's nice to be able to do, be able to just jump out and go and do that and not have to worry about anything. I'm not going to have to worry about answering any phone calls, anything. They know what the deal is. They know how to handle that kind of thing. And it's nice that real estate is able to give us that freedom to be able to do that, and nice tax advantages as well when you hold enough rentals to be able to write enough things off that offset your income from flips and wholesaling, all those kind of things.
For
So,
sure. For sure.
so your business is wholesaling. Now you're getting into small multifamily. By the way, stick with the small multifamily too, because I am there. There's still deals that I find there in different markets.
Okay.
There's still some really good deals, whereas we're doing underwriting on some of the bigger stuff right now, and the numbers are still so ridiculous, but we can find deals with the smaller ones because it gets to a point where those bigger players don't mess with the smaller ones because there's not enough meat on the bone for them for what they're
Right.
doing. And it's one of those little niches that, maybe some people on bigger pockets talk about it, but that's about it. I think it's a
Hmm.
great resource. You get enough of those small multis and you do pretty darn well. My 12 unit spits off, $3,500 of net income, like net nice
Mm.
after paying everything per month. That's huge. You get like 10 of them, that changes everything.
Yep.
So yeah, we're looking at doing more of that too. I have had Airbnbs. I sold them. I'm now in the process. I want to pick and choose where I want them, because what I want to do is have them in locations where I want to be able to utilize them maybe 1 week a year, right?
Yeah.
At some point. Maybe in the Rocky Mountains, somewhere in Colorado or Utah, or both, Montana maybe, or Wyoming. In Tennessee, what is the name of Gatlinburg, Tennessee? I do have a property there right now that we're renovating, but it needs to be approved for Airbnb status there, which is a
Okay.
process. So I don't know whether I'm going to be able to do that, but I bought this thing with the initial thought, if there's a lot of meat on the bone, I could fix and flip this thing. If I could turn it into an Airbnb, great. But if not, I turn it into that. So then I'll have properties all over the country I could potentially use to, as a free vacation place for me if I block it out per time. I think that's a neat little fun thing that we could do in this business that, I wouldn't be able to do if I wasn't in real estate, for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if you've met Sean Moore. I think it is. He talks about, I think he has a book out, Lifestyle Assets.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much, kind of what he talks about. And I love the concept, buying these Airbnbs and short-term rentals where you want a vacation. I mean,
Yeah.
it gives you more of an opportunity, incentive to go there. And it's a fun game trying to find a place that you would enjoy, and you get to set it up the way you'd want it and all that stuff. So yeah, I love that concept.
Yeah, and you could put your own little finishing touches on some of these things, these Airbnbs and stuff, that make it a little bit different than what everybody else has out there. I've seen some people do some unbelievable things with these Airbnbs, and they make good money, right? They make great money. They're never available. And then you have ones who are just run like basic. They still do really, really well
Mm-hmm.
overall, but there's little things that they could do to make them a little bit better. And that's, It's neat though. The shame of it is the government tries to get in there and tries to get more money and tries to get their hands in. And that's why it's like important where you're investing in these properties needs to be in spots where there's less government is what I've noticed, right?
Yeah.
We focus on Wyoming, who hates government. We focus on like Tennessee, Florida, Texas, these different markets where, the government and the Carolinas, the government doesn't get overly involved in you in Carolinas, and Ohio is actually a great state too, but it's more like you were saying, it's a linear state. It's not it doesn't have the big ups and downs. It's more linear, steady Eddie, and you get great cash flow from it. Every market a little bit different, but in the Carolinas, Airbnbs would do pretty darn well there too, for sure.
Yeah, my sister has a couple Airbnbs here, and they're nothing fancy. I mean, they're nice. She's done a great job with them, but they're not like your extravagant, ones that you might see in more of the vacation-y destinations. But they do really well.
It's surprising where there are Airbnbs in these little tiny small towns. You think there's an Airbnb there. I'm like, and they make like half decent money, better money than obviously if they were to just rent it out monthly doing it.
For sure.
It's very interesting.
I mean, look at us. We looked on Airbnb when the camper broke down, but there was nothing available. I mean, there was a very few, and I could tell there's a reason they were not booked. There were either really bad reviews or just pictures. You're like, we're not going to go there. But there are people who need them. And with our properties still in Ohio, we're not in anything. We're certainly not a vacation destination, and we do midterm. So, it has to be at least 2 weeks or longer. And then my dad has some short term. He lives on a farm, and so he has some of the more nightly rates. But you go out to the farm, you get to see some cows in the pasture and stuff, and he does really well with them. So you don't have to be in these vacation-y areas. But I will say, you just want to be careful of the laws, because in the vacation markets, they're prepared for Airbnbs. They've had that for years. They know that, and you're, I would say, safer buying them with that model. But in these other areas that, that's not the model, you have to kind of be prepared for it to change. If whatever the town decides they don't like them, they can kind of roll against short-term rentals, and you have to be prepared for that, or at least have a backup plan. That's what I would say.
So true. And, Gatlinburg, Tennessee is a primary example of that, just that, where you have to deal with going through the next layer of, everybody was calling me about this property. They want to buy it from me. Was it approved for an Airbnb? I'm like, no, they're not interested, right? Now, so what it taught me was, all right, maybe I should go through this process. Maybe I should hire an attorney to help me go through this process there with the town while I'm rehabbing it. Because if I get that approval, the house becomes way more valuable. So I'm do both. I'm probably going to do both with it here. And if I can only flip it, it's still going to do really well as a flip, because it's like 3 minutes from the town area where everybody wants to be. So location is really, really good. And the funny thing is, you got all these Airbnbs all around it. I'm like, how can they pick and choose who gets to be an Airbnb? Like, how is that lawful? How is that fair to people, right? They do it, but that's local government can do that. The other thing you want to be careful of in Airbnbs is HOAs. HOAs can be a bugger. And the property I had in the Poconos during COVID, I had to work around here. When COVID first happened, I remember this was April and May, and I had people booked for different times, and they wouldn't allow you to have short-term renters in there anymore. But what that did allow me was that 31 days counted as a long-term rental. So I was able to put people in for a little bit over a month. And I actually had record revenues that year because it was booked months out. A couple of people took it 2 months. Another person took it at high prices because they wanted to get the heck out of New York City. So it worked out. It worked out really well for me. But it just lucky, because the HOA could have declined everything. And then what am I doing with that property? Now I'm stuck with just doing it as a full-time rental or flipping it. So like you said, you got to be very, very careful what you do there, for sure. So another question I have for you, you talked about Life in Air, and Sean, actually, guy who wrote that book, is a friend of mine. And he's awesome, by the way. He's a great mastermind. You want to get high level thinking and different things with, he has a lot of relationship based stuff too, with husband and wife and stuff. It's really, really good stuff he's got. So if you ever wanted to do one of those, I'd highly recommend it. I guess basically what I'm asking you right now, what is your next step in real estate investing? What you have this plan, right? but is there a next leap you want to take? Do you want to do a certain amount of deals? Do you just want to kind of figure out where you want to be? Like what is your next step for you?
Sure. So that's an interesting question. And one of the problems that we have kind of faced is capital. A lot of people talk about real estate, and a lot of people saying you don't need money to buy real estate. Well, that's half true. You don't need money if you're going to make finding properties your career. If that's all you're going to do is find these properties, and that it kind of becomes your career, you're doing, a lot of seller financing, and you're either raising capital through other people, that can happen. But for a lot of people, that may happen once in a lifetime, that you get a great deal with little to no money down. And so we're kind of looking at it as a twofold thing. We always want to invest in real estate. We feel like that's the best place to put our money, but we also realize that we run out of money. This is an expensive hobby to be in, is real estate. In the long run, it'll definitely be worth it and pay for, our future. But the other side of the equation for us is businesses. And that's where, first off, we created the Streamline team. And then we're also looking at business acquisitions and purchasing more companies. And so kind of as we gauge the market, when it's a little harder to find deals, we're kind of switching over and looking at some, companies, that will complement real estate. We're looking at landscaping, cleaning, we're doing Airbnbs. So we're looking at cleaning companies, yard care, painting, flooring, all those kind of things that kind of go hand in hand. We're looking at that side of the equation too, because, we just need to keep increasing that income and that cash flow to put into real estate. So, over the next couple of years, that's kind of our bigger plan, is to purchase a few companies. And then as we find deals, as we find opportunities, keep placing that money into real estate, whether it's small multi or, if the market shifts and we're kind of pushed another direction, kind of staying open to that.
And that's smart, because all those companies you're talking about go hand in hand with your current real estate business. So it's one layer and another. It might reduce your expenses. And in the meantime, these other companies bring in other sources of revenue for you, which is extremely, extremely important. I think that's a great way to build your business. And you're building it organically for yourself through your own companies there, but you're also helping other investors, and you could bring in a lot of extra revenue with investors, or even just homeowners with some of the cleaning and landscaping and those different, and the painting businesses and those things. That's a great idea. I love it. I love what you're doing with your business model here, where you guys are going with it. I love that you made a big change too and moved to North Carolina. A lot of people don't make changes, right? It's big, especially when you got a family, 3 kids. It's big. And we had 4. We made our move too, and our oldest stayed up north because he was going to college that year. He was a freshman going into college. But it's good to be courageous and do that. And entrepreneurs always have that mindset more so. And it's a little bit easier for us to do maybe than some others. So another question I have for you, if you wouldn't mind me asking, you talked about Life and Air. Is there any books that really help you with real estate investing or tactically in real estate investing that you recommend?
Yeah, sure. I'll say the obvious one, the Robert Kiyosaki books. I love his books, but I feel like everybody has probably heard of those if you're in the space for any length of time.
They are the best though. Like Rich Dad, Poor Dad is like still my favorite to this day.
Yeah. And two, the same thing. I've got my Think and Grow Rich right here on the
Think and Grow Rich,
beside me. But other ones, I think Best in Class is another one that I think we've kind of gone through as far as management and stuff. We've done different books like the Lifestyle Asset by, Sean Moore. That's more like the short-term rentals. Yeah. A friend of ours, Bill Ham, has a book out. What's it called? It's kind of like a no money down book, but it talks about like the creative
financing, right?
Taking over loans. That was a good book as far as real estate. And then like more mindset books, the book Mindset by, I think it was Carol, I can't remember her last, Dweck maybe. That was a really good one. Just growth mindset versus the fixed mindset, and just being okay with growing and not feeling like you're a failure for wanting to grow. It's funny how we tend to think, if we're wrong, that's a negative thing. It's like, well, you just learn from those mistakes and be okay making mistakes. And so that was a really good one on mindset that I feel like really helped me personally. But yeah, those would be kind of some of my favorite ones.
Awesome. Those are good ones. Definitely all good ones there. People can utilize and take advantage of and help grow themselves and their business. Do both. Because when you feed yourself, you're going to automatically feed the business with it. It's going to get that extra little boost from it, from your extra energy and your happiness, right? The better mindset you're in, the better the business is going to do and grow and flourish for sure.
Yeah.
Now, Valerie, if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to be able to do that?
Sure. I'm on social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. Our website is thestreamlineteam.com. You can always reach out to me just by email at valerie@thestreamlineteam.com, and I'd be happy to chat. Chat anything, real estate, virtual assistants, mindset. I'm always making connections because I really believe in the power of networking, the power of meeting other people and growing, doing this whole thing together.
Terrific. And I'm going to have all these in the show notes, by the way, for those of you watch on YouTube or whether you're listening on the podcast stuff, they'll be in the show notes. So you guys will be able to get that information there and access that and reach out to Valerie for anything you might have, especially with her VAs. That could be a great resource from you. Valerie, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your time here.
Sure, Paul. Thanks so much for having me.
And thanks to everyone out there. And we will catch you on the next episode.